Hello, happy March 2nd. I can't believe it's already March. That's crazy. I'm here with an exciting video. I'm gonna go over all these books that I read in February. Also, I had an incredible reading month, so I'm gonna put y'all on. You guys have to save these for next February or anytime you feel like reading a tragic love story. I'm gonna go ahead and start with a book that I wanted to finish in January, but it leaked into February for good reason. And you'll understand when you know that that book is Lolita. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this book, what it's about, and it is about the life of a man that preys on children. Yeah, it's a tough read. It's hard to digest. It is disgusting and sinister. It is about a man that it kind of goes through his life. It tells us about him before he finds his victim Lolita and the steps he took in order to secure Lolita as his victim. It's very terrifying, hard to read. This is also a book written in such beautiful prose and such vivid descriptions that makes it even harder to stomach. You would think something so evil can't be described as something artful. It makes me sick just thinking about it. The way he would describe little girls and what he could do to them. The way he couldn't even take accountability for his wrongdoing, thinking that these children were literally spawns of the devil meant to tempt him. Thanking the Lord that he miraculously placed opportunities in front of him to pursue his evil doings. Yeah. I'm gonna read my review in Goodreads. I said, quite a disturbing read. It seems like a crime to have such beautiful writing describing the most sinister doings. This took me a while to read, with being placed in an uncomfortable position, the mind of a pedophile, but left the mark I think the reader is intended to digest, a study, exploration, and awareness of pedophilia and incest. Also, on the note of sinister men and young children, the Epstein files, guys. From all the videos and research that I have consumed, a lot of people are very, very concerned with the fact that 3 of the main people involved with Epstein are redacted from the files. To me, the Epstein files, a collection of proof, it's a collection of theories, it's a collection of correspondence, it's a collection of many things that could all bundle together and make a false story. And as a consumer, we know how this works. A lot of consumers believe anything that they're told. I'm not saying that all the Epstein files are false. I believe a lot of them are true with evidence. But for the main conspirators to be blocked from the files, I think is lawful. I think that protects possible victims. Take that lightly, and nothing good would ever happen if their names were unredacted. All I can see is more evil happening with unredaction of their names. Yet if the names were unredacted, how can you even trust that? Because we all know people with money and power can make anything disappear or can make anything pop up and appear. So even if things were unredacted, I think it would still be crazy to fully believe. I think another thing people are very adamant about is the fact that we can't trust people in power. And yes, we've known this. And the Epstein files are just shining a brighter spotlight on that, because there are powerful people with money involved with Epstein. There are a lot of suspicious people in the Epstein files. What they said is disgusting. Just because someone knows Epstein, just because someone was involved with Epstein for work, He was also a powerful person. He's gonna attract powerful people. And to assume that everyone involved with Epstein is at fault for what happened, I think that's pretty big to assume. Think of how many people you know and you hang out with, but you don't do what they do. And you don't know about the extent of how they spend their day and how they spend their time. And, you know, I don't blame you for not trusting the government, especially with past history, events that have happened. I think it's reasonable to distrust powerful people with money that can do whatever they want and have no limit to what they can do. And these are people that are making decisions for us as the people. Another thing is there are 3 million pages in the Epstein files, but 3 million pages that aren't available to the public. So there are still pages in that file that are not ever going to be seen, probably. Let me tell you, possibly evil people are protected, but the victims were not protected. I found out that these victims' pictures and their statements were open to the public. It was blurred out, but you could copy and paste it and see their information, see their pictures. How can we miss that? How was that missed? I don't understand that. These victims did not give consent to have their information aired out to the whole world. And if you could choose the lesser of the evils, I would definitely choose to air out potentially awful, evil people instead of victims who are healing and need their privacy. Okay? Anyway, that's my spill on the Epstein files. Back to books. The next book that I read was Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. This book follows Heathcliff and Catherine mainly, and their lives, which are intertangled with each other. Heathcliff is adopted by Catherine's father to just be a part of the family, but he's also described as dark-skinned, dark-eyed, just dark features, and this family is blonde hair, blue-eyed. He's already very discriminated within this family, but with this discrimination, he does eventually bond with Catherine, who's also dealing with her father, this crazy drunk states. They kind of bond and they eventually fall in love, and it takes them into their future lives. There's a miscommunication which leaves Heathcliff to run away and Catherine to marry another man, and Heathcliff suddenly reappears and he's a wealthy man. He can take care of himself, but it seems like he had time to plot a very in-depth, very lengthy revenge. Yeah, this guy was crazy, but Catherine was also crazy in her own way. I'm going to read what I wrote about Wuthering Heights. I found this book to be about trauma-bonded children who fell in love and carried that love, but also that trauma into adulthood. A love story more on dependence and obsession driven to insanity with a plot for vengeance. The extent of this vengeance thrown onto the next generation. Twisted, sinister, yet somehow scarily universal. Guys, let's talk about the movie. You guys have probably heard that the movie and book are nothing alike, and I'm here to agree with that. It didn't help that I went into the movie and watched it right after I finished the book. So I was already going into the movie kind of biased. I really tried to go in with an open mind, but it was hard because it was really nothing like the book at all. The book is so vast, so intricate with all the characters and how they tie together and how vengeance can wreck a generation and a future generation. The movie was more focused on Heathcliff and Catherine's love story, which is fine. I knew it was just like an adaptation of Wuthering Heights, but when I was watching it, I feel like with what was given to us, still was done quite poorly. I feel like the movie was definitely geared towards the consumer and not the readers, for sure. Because what type of love story that's close to obsession and insanity and toxic relationship and a toxic love doesn't feed the consumer? I think the producers knew their audience and fed them what they knew would make them money. To me, I can understand that, but I feel like even with their story, just the two of them, like the narrative really focusing on them, I feel like it wasn't even enough. I do think the filming of the movie was phenomenal. The mood was phenomenal. The setting was incredible, but the character development was lacking. I feel like if they had really built up Heathcliff's discrimination and their like bond together as children, their story as an adult would have been so much better. I mean, there definitely were shots that were like really insane. Like, what the heck? Why is Catherine's husband have a wall with a freckle in her veins on it? Like, that's crazy. Even that, like, yes, that will draw the consumer in. That will give a space for the output to be highly talked about and highly controversial and highly viewed, because you don't see that in every movie. It just wasn't much for what it was to me. I'm usually deeply moved by characters in a very good movie, and when I was watching Wuthering Heights, I was just insanely uncomfortable. So there are pros and cons to it, and I understand that it's just based off of Wuthering Heights, and it's definitely veered more towards Heathcliff and Catherine's story, but still I feel like it was lacking. Although I do think if they did anything else with filming like Wuthering Heights, they could make an iconic TV show. Like a TV show that is very in line with the book would be a big hit. Let's be real. The book is universal and it's relatable and it's raw. A consumer is eventually going to fall in love with that and see themselves in that and relate to it more, instead of this over the top scenes in the movie. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's my opinion on Wuthering Heights. I think I'm gonna put my hair up. I'm getting overstimulated and my hair is burning. Ooh, okay. Guys, the next book, The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I feel like this is a complete, like, 180 to all the other books. This is also not a curated book that I wanted to read for February, but it was the last book that I physically owned that I hadn't read yet. My older sister actually got this for me for Christmas. She's a big fan of C.S. Lewis. She thinks his writing is genius and phenomenal. I found this book very interesting. It basically is in the format of letters of correspondence from an uncle to a nephew. But this uncle and nephew are like demons in hell, and they're trying to win a soul to be in hell. And this uncle is obviously very trained in what he's done. He's captured many souls and brought them to hell. He's giving his nephew advice for how to best tempt a human. It really dives into like human psychology, how predictable human nature is, and how easy it is to tempt a person, especially when they're down, how they can take a situation and manipulate it into something for their own benefit. This is really a spiritual warfare written to seem more real. And I think that's very important. Very different from books that I curated for my February TBR, but it was still a great book nonetheless. Let me read what I wrote. The Screwtape Letters was very thought-provoking and convicting. Originally, I thought it was written more for new believers, but as I was reading through, I realized I could definitely grab this at any point and learn from it. It showed me that I've grown as a believer, but also still need to grow with fervor. The way this book was written was intriguing from the perspective of demons trying to win over a soul, which makes it more of a reality instead of something almost too good to be true, lovey-dovey, all is well, hopeful fantasy. It's quite genius because humans tend to focus or have more opinion on the negative versus the positive. Sometimes something too good can be thought of as wishful thinking and naivety, but this book is quick to show that the spiritual realm and spiritual warfare is real, and is consistently trying to break a person down. It's interesting to think sometimes all I need is a change of narrative or perspective to renew importance. The way C.S. Lewis can take on the narrative of something evil, to me, shows his knowledge and priority to be steadfast in his faith, and his ability to portray it in an accessible way. Seems like he finds this topic of high importance and needs to share this importance with anyone searching for answers. This is a book that I want to reread, but really sit down and study it. Oh, something that was really intriguing after I read this book. Okay, the last section of this book was so, mind-opening, I feel like. It was honestly very scary because it's talking about the issues that we as humans are experiencing today and his opinion on it. Following this sort of thought chain, Bailey Sarian, I watch every single one of her videos. She came out with a video that was titled, "What Are We Going to Do?" And I think it was just in response to her researching the Epstein files and her being terrified of the people in power and terrified that some of these people involved with Epstein are making decisions for we the people. And she was basically saying that what matters to us as the people now is so irrelevant to the broad spectrum of what is really going on and what should matter. And she was basically telling her audience, we need to set our differences aside and come together, unite as a nation, be at peace with each other, and only then can we make a change. Because we've done everything we can as the people. We do what the government tells us to do, but there has been no changes. I don't really even know the basis of her argument, so I can't say that I agree with it, but I can agree with the points that she's making in her argument. I think it's important as a nation. It's always been important as a nation, regardless of trying to make change in the government or trying to make change to the people in power over us. It's always been important for us as a nation to come together and be at peace with each other. But I agree with Bailey Sarian and what she's saying. If you want to make a change, we have to set aside our differences and come together, because the differences that are presented in each of us may just be a distraction from what's really going on in the government. And the government is really having a chokehold on all these distractions and really trying to make it more of an issue than what it really needs to be. I'm not saying that our differences now don't matter, but I do agree that to make a difference in what you might want to make a difference in, you have to set those aside for the time being. This last section of the book was literally talking about that. It was talking about how the people need to come together and what's going to be the consequences if that doesn't happen. And I literally watched Bailey Sarian's video right after I finished this, and I was like, I just read about this, and this man, it's like he knows the future or something. Ooh. Okay, let me just show you the next 3 books. I read these books in this order. I read Madonna in a fur... No, wait, what? I think I read White Nights, Madonna in a Fur Coat, and then The Sorrows of Young Werther. It literally could not have been a better progression of tragedy. Holy moly. White Nights is basically about a man that falls in love with a woman and seemingly has her, but in the end he never had her. And it's just a very universal book, very heartbreaking. I think this happens to the everyday person. And then after that, Madonna in a Fur Coat. This is a book about a man who's very passive in his life because he's so unsatisfied with it, with how it turned out, because this man in his past years fell in love with this woman. He actually came about this woman because she was a portrait in an art gallery, and he would sit and stare at this portrait for hours and hours. Turns out he ends up actually meeting this woman, and he falls hard for her. And this man literally defines love through this woman. Like, this woman is literally the definition of love. Their time together ends when his mother dies and he has to go back home. He left her with this crazy illness, and they were just corresponding by letters, and eventually her letters just stopped coming, and the rest of his life he was just in puzzlement of what became of her. So he settled, he got married to a woman that he didn't want to marry, he had kids, he had a job that he didn't want. He was just very unsatisfied with the life that he had for himself. And then the puzzle unravels, and it is heartbreaking. It is tragic. And it's not tragic in this universal way like White Nights. It's a step above that. The tragedy storyline has way more knots and is all raveled up and tangled together. And it's just so much more complex, with the end result being more to lose. And that just made this book a step above White Nights, in my opinion. Whew. And then The Sorrows of Young Werther. Guys, this book broke me. I was genuinely on my knees broken by this book. Honestly, this is one of my favorite books now, because it was just so well done, but so heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. This man basically falls in love with a woman that he can never have from the beginning. This woman is engaged to a man already, and the whole time he's talking about her, each time it's like a progression of, she should be with me, why aren't we together, why can't she end this engagement with this man that doesn't even deserve her, he's an exceptional man but he doesn't understand her. And really, in the beginning of the book, before this guy knew this woman, he was the happiest, most go-lucky, most hopeful person that you could ever read about. You tangibly felt the joy that he was portraying in this book. And then towards the end of the book, part 2 of this book, oh my gosh, his love for this woman that isn't returned to him destroys him and wrecks him to the core. All of a sudden, you're haunted by him, and you feel suffocated and you feel heartbroken. You're kind of in this craze of what is happening and how can we fix it, but you couldn't fix it. The ending is so tragic. This was awful, so awful, but it was so beautifully and intricately and intentionally done. I could not wrap my head around how beautiful the writing is for such a tragic ending to happen. If you decide to read any one of these books, I would say read it in this progressing of tragedy. White Nights, Madonna in a Fur Coat, and then The Sorrows of Young Werther. Whew. Oh my gosh, talk about being a tragic February for real. Let me just read each summary individually. My light is going out. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, let's see. White Nights. It's just short. I believe White Nights is a tragic love story that is universally felt. For those who are still in love with someone, loving someone you had but have no longer, this might be the book you're in pursuit of. To feel seen and heard without saying a word. But to me, I'm still left with questions and analyzing wordplay. Madonna in a Fur Coat. Ooh, I have a bigger review for this one. Madonna in a Fur Coat. Very haunting as expected, yet also an unexpected warning. I see a woman with an expected version of love and a man's definition of love in this woman. I see a woman longing for a love that she needs, but confronted with the love that she has. She compared this man to a child and a woman, like her mother, just another person to take care of. This is important because how can she care for someone when she's the one who needs caring for? This someone being completely and solely dependent on her. With this man continuing to set this burden on her, the burden of being loved, she thinks the problem is her. Why can't she fall in love when love is right in front of her face? She's convinced she's a contradiction to the female gender, comparing her traits to a man. This is because every man she's given chance to, she's played a masculine role, mothering men, completely in contrast to what she needs as a woman with her own needs, and completely opposite from the love she's looking for. Being convinced, she starts living in vain for a love that she's not looking for, not realizing that potential isn't the answer. In this burden, I see danger. This man is alone and has been the entirety of his life. He's never experienced love, never seen the world outside of hopelessness. The danger of coming alive with the credit of a single person. The danger is in putting sole dependence of life and living on someone you love. Danger of all-consuming love with all-consuming desire, with even a soul for the taking. Even the danger in love withheld, the consequences of a loveless state, which becomes the foundation of who a person is, and the shape of how love is desired or not desired. How could this person possibly live without their all-consumed, all-desired, soul-sucked husk of a person that they call their lover? And that seems like the ultimate danger. Is there love? Yes. Is there yearning? Yes. Is it what could have been? Yes. But it's also existentialism, obsession, dependence, loneliness, and loss, warning and danger. Madonna in a Fur Coat is yearning from a man's perspective, yet blind to the warning signs. Whew. Okay, let's read The Stars of Young Werther. I said, I'm unwell and don't think I can recover. I need to stare at a blank wall for a while, jaw hanging, eyes unblinking. I started this book with the most content, all-filled heart and ended with a tumultuous, haunted heart. I read White Nights by Dostoyevsky and Madonna in a Fur Coat by Ali, and gosh, what a progression of tragedy. I can say each haunted me in a very deafening way. My takeaways in progression with reading the book. A book exploring a self-aware young man's belief in his ideas, thoughts, philosophy, quick to point out hypocrisies and paradoxes, but also presenting himself as a paradox in the process, and coining love to be the start of many paradoxes. I think it boils down to never assuming the state of a person based off of shallow perspective, and never pinpointing the state to a set way things should be done. Each individual presents a different mindset and belief, so each will do according to that mindset. And who are we to be presumptuous of how one should conduct his own life? Yet it shows how a person is susceptible to his emotions and how it rules his life, mostly negative. He seems to be in character to the thoughts and feelings most people have, but also disliked by the reader at times as he voices thoughts and feelings that we didn't have the courage or had decency not to do so ourselves. And sometimes he seems crazy, but haven't we done, thought, or said the things that he does and justified it? The author did an incredible job finding a realistic and raw balance between extremes of emotion. His way of depicting nature has been unmatched in what I've read so far. Goethe's writing had been laughing aloud one moment and gasping in despair the next. You were given every red flag, yet still hoped for a happier ending. The joy, wonder-filled, simple beginning will be cherished, the intricately designed climax will never be forgotten, and the ending of this masterpiece will haunt me for a long while. I grabbed this book to read about a man who yearned for a woman he could never have, and got the most tragic love story I've ever read. Gosh. Okay, let's try to finish this real quick before before my lighting goes out. Next book, Jane Austen, Persuasion by Jane Austen. I really enjoyed this book. It was very good. It wasn't a tragic love story like all the other books that I had been reading. This was actually a love story about Jane Austen and Captain Wentworth, who earlier in their lives had been engaged, and Jane was persuaded by her confidant to end the engagement because Captain Wentworth didn't have money and she couldn't see how he could provide for Anne. Did I say this book was about Jane Austen? It's about Anne Elliot. Anyway, she's persuaded to end this engagement and it haunts her for 7 years, and she wishes she would have married him and kept the engagement because she has never met anyone close to the man Wentworth is. And of course, it ends in a happy ending, but it has so many plot twists and kind of leaves you on your toes. I think it was a great relief from all the books I have been reading, to be honest, to just have a nice, simple love story that ends on a happy ending. Let me quickly read what I wrote about it. I think it might be a longer summary because I definitely had my thoughts. If you want more in depth of what I thought, I did do a reading vlog. Persuasion was a sweet love story, but unexpectedly so much more. The book has the underlying theme of character study through the use of the word persuasion. Persuading someone and being persuaded are two very different things, and when the book delves into how each character thinks to use this word in all its forms, it's quite a genius work. With Jane Austen's funny and witty writing, the portrayal of all characters are simplistic. Highly esteemed characters are portrayed with a tactfulness, while characters with poor characteristics are portrayed with comical frivolousness. But each had their underlying seriousness. I loved Anne Elliot's character. She had quality character, with control over her thoughts, emotions, and actions, and had such tact over how she controlled and presented herself. She was a private person with a rich inner life, understanding and empathetic with the human condition and others' feelings. All this while having a horrible family life where she is presented as useless, overlooked, and in the way. The book also shows that with high-quality character traits, Anne was still heavily persuaded, taken advantage of, and used. When in the book was she not busy with other people's tasks, or taking on a burden that wasn't hers to take on? It seems constant. But even though this character is seemingly overlooked, she was still highly regarded and sought for an opinion. When she was being persuaded, taken advantage of, or used, it was never under the pretense of a weak person. She was still conscious of others' actions and had her suspicions. I also loved that Anne was not portrayed as a crazy, naive, hopeless dreamer when she was still in love with someone from years ago. She was very tactful, confident, and sure of herself. It just goes to show that although people can be burdened with inner turmoil, they are still someone with high-quality character. A weakness does not take away from the whole of a person. This book was a love story, reuniting long-lost but never forgotten love, with twists and turns that keep you on your toes. It's also about social class, hypocrisy, manipulation, family relation, and friendship. That kind of sucks. My last book, I had to turn on my lamp. On we go. The lighting is awful. Okay, last book that I read in February, The Great Gatsby. This is easily one of my favorite books now. I loved this book. This book follows a man who knew Gatsby, and he actually became his neighbor. His cousin turns out being the love of Gatsby's life that he's never gotten over. And somehow Gatsby finds out about this, and he makes a big plan to try to get this man to bring his cousin so that they can reunite and fall in love again. This plan works. They do reunite, but it's very complicated. This woman is married with a child, and her husband is also very complicated. It seems like she could easily leave her husband because he's having an affair but it's not that simple. And Gatsby himself is presented as a man with huge mystery and suspicion surrounding him because people don't understand him or know anything about him. I think maybe the last 3 or 4 chapters will wreck you, and it progressively gets worse than you can imagine. You really, really hope for a happy outcome, and it just never happens. But this outcome is one of the most tragic outcomes that I've ever read. Not only just the fact that of the love aspect of it, not only that was heartbreaking and a tragedy, but this man's life turned to a true tragedy. It was very hard to stomach and to be left off with the way that this book was left off. This book, while also a tragedy, there was always something going on, there was always something happening, there was always something exciting to read about, and for that reason, I also really, really loved it. I think this is a masterpiece. Let me read what I wrote. I don't think what I wrote is a spoiler. I don't know. I never know if it's a spoiler because I'm really not telling anything about the book. Talk about an ongoing tragic ending. Wow, this was an exploration of a man widely celebrated for his mystery and wealth, but wholly dismissed and forgotten when it mattered. Caught up in affairs and broken marriages with no communication, characters driven to insanity with a tragic end. This also explores in Gatsby a man clinging onto his past and seeing nothing being possible outside of his experience since then. No excuses to have this said past back, and brought to full shock when the past is as being said in the past. Very sad and heartbreaking. Outside of the story, the author's writing is incredibly funny and witty and has insane descriptions that you wish were tangible, just to experience exactly what he's portraying. That concludes all the books that I read in February. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. I'm sorry about the lighting. I'm sorry the sun sets at 5. It's a bummer. I hate it. Anyway, I hope you guys got some recommendations, and also with the books that I said were my favorites, please give me suggestions that are kind of in the same realm as the favorites that I mentioned here. I would really love to read more books like it. Here soon, I'll come out with my March TBR. So I'm excited for that. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope each of you have an amazing March and have the best reading month